President Trump met with the House Deputy Whip team to discuss the transition from Obamacare to a Republican proposal. At that meeting, the president endorsed the plan unveiled by congressional Republicans Monday night.
I'm proud to support the replacement plan released by the House of Representatives and encouraged by members of both parties. I think really that we're going to have something that's going to be much more understood and much more popular than people can even imagine.
Later Tuesday, the president tweeted, "I feel sure that my friend Rand Paul will come along with the new and great health care program because he knows Obamacare is a disaster." Cameron Joseph is in Washington. He's the New York Daily News Washington bureau chief. So, Cameron, I want to play a bit of what Senator Rand Paul and the Freedom Caucus had to say Tuesday in their criticism of the House GOP's Obamacare replacement bill. Let's take a listen.
Make no mistake, there are three plans out there. There's the Cassidy-Collins plan, which is basically if you like Obamacare, you can keep Obamacare. There's the leadership plan that was brought forward, which I believe, when you look through it, is Obamacare in a different form. And then there's our plan.
We are united on repeal, but we are divided on replacement. What's the best way to get past this impasse? Let's vote on what we voted on before, a clean repeal. Let's separate out the replacement plans. Conservatives have a replacement plan. House leadership has a replacement plan. I'm sure Democrats would like to go back and vote on the HCA again. Vote on all the replacement plans and let's see what happens.
All right, so this bill is expected to get no Democratic vote, so there's not much room here for Republican defections. Can supporters of the bill beat back critics, you think, or has the Obamacare light narrative crippled it on arrival?
I think it's hurt it pretty badly, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I think they might be able to force this through the House. They have some wiggle room. They have about 20 votes they can afford to lose there. And, you know, when confronted with either vote for this or vote for nothing and have possibly President Trump saying you're the one blocking Obamacare repeal, I think some of these conservatives are going to end up caving. But a lot of them aren't, and that's going to be problematic. It's a bigger problem, I think, in the Senate because they only have 51 votes over there. If they lose 3 people, it's basically done. And there's already 3 Republicans, including Rand Paul, who you just saw, who are attacking this bill from the right. There's 4 Republicans who are already criticizing this bill from the left, basically because of the way that they're going to unroll Medicaid after a couple of years, and Medicaid expansion. And so they have very little room for error here. And the fact that conservative groups are coming up blasting as hard as they are against this early is deeply problematic.
Well, I want to ask you about the political reality then of Obamacare. Congress has just under 70 legislative days until their August recess to get this through. The White House also wants to handle tax reform by then. So we've seen here in 2 days fierce conservative opposition to this health care plan. Is the timeline you think that they've set out for themselves realistic?
Well, that's not even the timeline they're claiming. Senate Republicans today were saying they're hoping to get this done by the Easter recess. And I think that is actually basically impossible. It's hard for me to see how the House gets it done and then the Senate actually works it through by then. It's 5 weeks, essentially. August, maybe, with Obamacare repeal. As you saw when the Democrats tried to do this, they took through that. And when they got to the August recess, it was pretty disastrous when all these members went home and they had a lot of Tea Party organized rallies against them. It was a little different then, obviously, because they were trying to do something with Republican support for a long time. They stuck with that and it ended up dragging out the process a lot. But this is not as simple as some of these folks are trying to make it seem. As President Trump, and I'm paraphrasing, said, you know, this is a little harder than a lot of people realize, or at least I think some people in the White House realized at first. And so this is going to be complicated. And this is complicated. Tax reform is even more complicated. It's very near impossible for me to see this actually getting done, both of them getting done by the August recess.
All right. Well, back on health care for a moment. As you know, several conservative groups, including the Club for Growth and the Koch-backed group Americans for Prosperity, are pushing back at Speaker Ryan to oppose the GOP blueprint. What is the level of concern among Republicans? And given the proposed draft, how do Republican leaders appear to be responding to the pressure?
Well, they're defending it. There's a bunch of different folks who are out there on both sides of the aisle, not both sides of the chamber, both House and Senate, saying this is the bill we're going to use. We'll make some changes. We'll make some concessions if we have to, but this is the basic framework. And that's what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was saying. That's what Paul Ryan was saying. That's what the Republicans who introduced this bill were saying. And Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady was asked about that Obamacare Light title, and he responded by saying it's Obamacare gone. And I think that's the message they're going to push is it's this or nothing. And if they can't get this done, it's going to be very difficult for them to get anything done. And I think that at the end of the day, that's going to be convincing to a couple of Republicans, especially if President Trump decides to put the full weight of his office behind this and really use the bully pulpit. It was interesting to see that Ted Cruz was not at the House conservative event alongside Rand Paul and Mike Lee. He'd been critical of this from the right, but he's facing a re-election and possibly a tough primary. And so the folks who you could see face a tough primary if they vote against Obamacare repeal, I think are going to fold. But it's going to be interesting to see whether they can get enough of them in both chambers.
So you mentioned the White House. We heard the president come to the defense of the bill Tuesday, but is that as close to a full-throated endorsement of this plan, you think, besides what some have interpreted as a lukewarm response Monday from the White House?
Yeah, it was pretty notable that President Trump didn't say anything about this bill until Tuesday morning in a tweet when this had come out Monday night. Now, the White House did make a push for this. Vice President Pence was up on the Hill today. He was singing its praises in a Senate meeting, and then he met with some of the House conservative leaders who have come out opposing this, or at least talking about opposing this. So they're working this behind the scenes. You saw Tom Price at the White House talking about this today. Mick Mulvaney is defending it. President Trump himself had one tweet and one quick comment in a private meeting today that was for the cameras. And so I think if this is going to get done, you're going to need to see more direct involvement from the White House and not just the surrogates. You're really going to need to see, President Trump is really good at bullying people. It's a talent he has. And I think he's going to need to turn that against a couple of the people in his own party if he wants to get this done.
Finally, Cameron, I want to turn to the president's approval rating. While there obviously have been his detractors. His approval rating has bumped up a bit following his address to Congress last week. A new Quinnipiac poll shows it at 41%, with 55% saying that he is not an honest person and 52% that he does not care about average Americans. What do you make of these numbers, and do you imagine that they may climb from here?
Well, the numbers really haven't changed that much. I think Quinnipiac's last poll was 38%. That's within the margin of error. You see those numbers bump up and down like that all the time. Other polls have his numbers at slightly better. It tends to be the automated polls that you don't have live callers are showing him in a slightly better position, and that's been true throughout the campaign. But overall, he's not in a good position. He's in a historically weak position for a new president. I think that shows, A, how divisive he is as a president. His base of support is very strong, but a lot of people really don't like him. And so it's going to be interesting to see. A lot of people have pretty firm opinions about President Trump. And it's hard for me to see great movement. Obviously, major events could change that dramatically. But right now, barring some major success or something like a terrorist attack or something like that, these numbers look pretty baked in. And for somebody this early in his presidency, that's not a good sign for President Trump.
All right, Cameron Joseph in Washington for us. Cameron, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.